She was thrown out of her home with a newborn baby in her arms and her 86-year-old mother stumbling by her side, until a lonely farmer discovered a secret that would change everything forever. Can you imagine being put out on the street by your own sister-in-law, with nowhere to go, with a days-old child and a sick elderly woman depending on you? It seems like too much cruelty to be real, but this story happened in the interior lands of Goyas in 1862, and what came after transformed absolute misery into a twist that no one could have predicted. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and leave your like, because the outcome of this story will surprise you in a way you never imagined. A twist that transformed despair into redemption. And tell me here in the comments what city you're watching this story from. I'd love to know how far these emotional stories are reaching. It was a sweltering afternoon in March when Helena's life completely fell apart. The sky was tinged with an intense orange, that shade that usually announces a storm, and it seemed to weigh upon the modest property on the outskirts of Vila Boa, today known as Goiás Velho. Only 12 days had passed since she had given birth to Clara, her first daughter. 12 days since she should have been celebrating the arrival of a new life, wrapped in the warmth of a welcoming home. But instead, she was burying her husband. Benedito was only 29 years old when a malignant fever, which plagued the region that scorching summer, tore his life away in less than a week. It started with slight chills, a headache that he insisted was just tiredness. Within 3 days, he was delirious, his body burning with high fever, his skin yellowed, his eyes sunken. Helena, still recovering from the difficult birth that nearly cost her life, dragged herself around the house trying to care for him, alternating between nursing the baby who cried endlessly and applying cold cloths to her husband's forehead. When the healer finally arrived, coming from a distant farm, it was already too late. Benedito no longer recognized anyone. He called for his mother, who had died years ago, mumbled senseless words, grabbed at the air as if he were drowning. Helena held his hand until his last breath, at 3 in the morning on a Thursday, while rain hammered on the tile roof and the baby cried in the makeshift cradle beside the bed. During those terrible 12 days, Helena could barely process what had happened. Her body still ached from childbirth. Her breasts were constantly swollen, leaking milk through the dresses she no longer had the energy to change. Her hands trembled when she held Clara, not just from physical weakness, but from a paralyzing fear of the future. And her heart was broken into pieces so small they seemed impossible to put back together. But she wasn't completely alone. Her mother, Dona Josefa, was there. Even at 86 years old, even with severely debilitated health, even with legs that could barely support her and the chronic cough that woke her every night, Dona Josefa didn't leave her daughter alone for a single moment. The old lady had arrived a month before the birth, coming from a small village 5 days' journey away, brought in a wagon by a merchant who took pity on her condition. Dona Josefa was a woman of striking presence, despite her advanced age and physical fragility. Her face was a map of deep wrinkles that told stories of a lifetime of hard work, painful losses, and a willpower that defied death itself. Her eyes, even clouded by the cataract that was slowly stealing her vision, still shone with a sharp intelligence and a perception about people that bordered on the supernatural. She always wore a faded brown shawl over her shoulders curved by osteoporosis, and her hands, deformed by severe rheumatism, fingers twisted like dry branches, could still hold her daughter's hands with surprising firmness in moments of despair. Dona Josefa had been a midwife in her youth, had brought more than 200 children into the world throughout her life. It was she who had helped Helena during the difficult birth, with her experienced hands guiding the child into the world even when everything seemed lost. Now, almost blind and weak, it was she who rocked the baby through endless nights, who heated water for baths, who murmured ancient prayers in Latin that she had learned from nuns decades ago. Helena was 26 years old and was a woman of simple but striking beauty. Her thick black hair, usually tied in a long braid down her back, had completely lost its shine in recent weeks. Her oval face, with delicate features, prominent cheekbones and large eyes of an almost black brown, was pale as wax, marked by exhaustion and suffering. Deep dark circles surrounded her eyes, which seemed to have aged decades in a matter of days. She was naturally thin, but now she was almost skeletal, her skin stretched over bones, clothes hanging loose on her emaciated body. She wore a black morning dress, borrowed from a neighbor, that was already worn and stained. Her hands, which had once been skilled with needle and thread, embroidering by commission to help support the household, now trembled constantly, unable even to hold a cup without spilling its contents. Benedito had been a good man, a tireless worker, honest to the core, dedicated to his family with a love that manifested in simple but profound gestures. He wasn't rich, nor did he have great ambitions, but he ensured the modest support of his family with his work on the small property that had belonged to his family for 2 generations. He cultivated corn, beans, cassava. He raised some chickens, 2 pigs, a dairy cow that gave milk to sell in the village. The house where they lived was simple, but had been built with care. 3 modest bedrooms, 1 for the couple, 1 for Helena's mother when she arrived, and 1 that would be for the baby. A small living room with rustic furniture that Benedito himself had built, a kitchen with a wood stove that heated the house on cold nights, and a small backyard with a vegetable garden that Helena tended with dedication. The walls were adobe, whitewashed, but already needed repairs. The colonial tile roof had some leaks that Benedito had planned to fix, but never got around to it. The floor was packed earth, covered with straw mats in the main areas. It wasn't luxury, far from it, but it was a home, or at least it had been, until that terrible afternoon in March. The burial was the next day, a quick and modest ceremony. The village priest, Father Anselmo, a fat and indifferent man, barely disguised his impatience as he mumbled prayers in Latin. Few attended. Some curious neighbors, more interested in gossiping than in offering condolences. 2 workers who had helped Benedito in the fields, and Augusto, Benedito's older brother, accompanied by his wife, Lucia. Augusto was a tall and corpulent man, with a hard face and a perpetually scowling expression. He was 35 years old, but looked older, with deep wrinkles on his forehead and around his always pursed mouth. His eyes were small and dark, full of a coldness that made people look away. He dressed better than his deceased brother, with finer fabric clothes, genuine leather boots, a hat that denoted a certain prosperity. He had inherited most of the family lands when their father died years ago, leaving only that small property to Benedito. An injustice that Augusto never openly admitted, but which was clear in the disdainful way he treated his younger brother. Now, standing beside the shallow grave, his eyes surveyed the property with an interest he didn't try to hide. Lucia, his wife, was a thin and nervous woman, with a narrow face and a sharp nose that gave her the appearance of a bird of prey. She was 32 years old and had a reputation in the region for being stingy and cruel to the poor. Her light eyes, a faded blue tone, fixed on Helena with a mixture of contempt and poorly disguised satisfaction. She wore a dark dress, but adorned with lace and ribbons that seemed completely inappropriate for a funeral. Throughout the ceremony, Lucia whispered to Augusto, discreetly pointing to the house, to the yard, making comments that Helena couldn't hear, but whose malicious tone reached her like a plague. The baby cried endlessly, inconsolable in her trembling grandmother's arms, and Helena felt like she was floating outside her own body, watching that terrible scene as if she were a stranger. When the body was finally covered with earth and people began to disperse, Augusto approached Helena. He didn't offer condolences, didn't ask how she was, showed no compassion for his sister-in-law's visible suffering. Instead, with a cold and bureaucratic voice, he announced that they needed to talk about the situation. Helena, still in shock, just nodded. Dona Josefa, holding the baby, watched Augusto with her clouded eyes, but her expression said she knew exactly what was coming. The old lady had seen too much human evil in her 86 years to be surprised by anything. The next day, Augusto and Lucia appeared at the house early. Helena had barely slept, had spent the entire night awake, alternating between nursing Clara and crying silently in the empty bed. Dona Josefa was lying in the other room, her cough echoing through the thin walls. When the in-laws entered, Helena was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into emptiness, a cup of cold tea in front of her. Augusto wasted no time with formalities. He sat at the table without being invited. Lucia remained standing behind him, arms crossed, face impassive. "Helena," Augusto began, his voice as dry as dead leaves, "we need to discuss the future of this property." Helena slowly raised her eyes, confused. "The future? This land," Augusto continued, making a vague gesture toward the door, "belonged to my father's family. It was lent to Benedito when he married you. But now that he's gone, there's no reason for you to remain here." The words took a few seconds to penetrate the fog of grief that enveloped Helena's mind. When she finally understood what was being said, she felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "Lent," she repeated, her voice weak. "Benedito always said this was his part of the inheritance." Lucia let out a short, cruel laugh. His inheritance was being able to live here while he was alive and worked the land. But he's dead now, and you're not family by blood. "I'm his widow," exclaimed Helena, her voice breaking. "The mother of his niece." "A widow with no means of support," said Augusto coldly. "Another mouth to feed. And that old woman there," he pointed toward the room where Dona Josefa was coughing, "is another dead weight. I can't allow my property to be wasted on charity." "Your property?" Helena felt anger beginning to boil through the shock and pain. Benedito lived here his whole life, worked this land since he was a boy, built this house with his own hands. "And now he's dead," said Lucia with a casual cruelty that made Helena shudder. "The dead have no rights. You have until the end of the week to leave." "The end of the week?" Helena stood up unsteadily, holding onto the table to avoid falling. "But I just gave birth. My mother is sick. Where will we go?" Augusto shrugged, a gesture of absolute indifference. "That's not my problem. Do you have family? Friends? I suggest you find someone willing to shelter you. Because in 7 days, this house will be locked and you'll be considered a trespasser if you're still here." "Trespasser?" Helena's voice was almost a scream now. "In the house where I lived with my husband? Where my daughter was born?" "Don't be dramatic," said Lucia, examining her nails with disinterest. "We're being generous by giving you a week. We could throw you out today." Dona Josefa appeared in the bedroom doorway, leaning against the frame, the shawl slipping from her shoulders. Her voice, hoarse from coughing, still had surprising strength. "You're monsters," she said, looking directly at Augusto. "Your brother has barely cooled in the ground and you're already plundering what was his. You don't have a drop of decency or humanity." Augusto stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly on the floor. "Watch your tongue, old woman, or we'll reduce the deadline to 3 days." "Do what you want," said Dona Josefa, spitting out the words. "God is watching, and he collects. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but he collects." Lucia laughed again, that unpleasant sound that seemed like scratches on the soul. "Threats from a superstitious old woman don't scare me. Augusto, let's go. We've said what we had to say." The couple left without looking back, leaving Helena and Dona Josefa in a heavy silence, broken only by the baby's whimpers in the room. Helena collapsed back into the chair, hands covering her face, and finally broke down completely. Violent sobs shook her thin body, and she cried with an intensity that seemed to have no end. Dona Josefa dragged herself to her daughter, placing her deformed hands on Helena's trembling shoulders. There were no words of comfort to offer. They were truly without options. In the following days, Helena desperately tried to find a solution. She went to the nearest neighbors' houses, but everyone averted their eyes, mumbled excuses about not having space or extra resources. The truth was that no one wanted to defy Augusto, who was an influential man in the region, with extensive lands and political connections. Whoever crossed him could suffer retaliation, and no one was willing to risk it for a poor widow and a dying old woman. She went to the parish house, asked Father Anselmo for help. He received her in his comfortable office, full of fine furniture and a desk covered with papers and books. He listened to her with an expression of poorly disguised boredom, absent-mindedly fiddling with a silver crucifix. "My daughter," he said when Helena finished her desperate plea, "the church cannot interfere in matters of property and inheritance. This is a civil, legal matter. If Augusto has documents proving the land is his, there's nothing I can do." "But father," Helena begged, tears streaming down her face, "my daughter is only 2 weeks old. My mother is dying. We have nowhere to go. Shouldn't the church help those most in need?" Father Anselmo sighed, as if this were a great inconvenience. The church offers spiritual comfort, my daughter. For material needs, you should seek the Brotherhood of Mercy in the city. Perhaps they have a shelter available." "The city is 3 days' journey away," exclaimed Helena. "How will I get there with a newborn baby and an elderly woman who can barely walk?" The priest shrugged, a cruel echo of Augusto's gesture. "I'm sorry, but I can't do more than that. I'll include you in my prayers." Prayers? As if prayers could feed them or give them a roof. Helena left the parish house feeling more desperate than ever. She tried to find work, anything she could do to earn some money. She went to the store, to the tavern, to the houses of the wealthier families, offering to wash clothes, clean, cook. But no one wanted to hire a woman who had just given birth, still weak and clearly desperate. "Come back in a few months," they said, "when you're stronger." But she didn't have a few months. She only had 5 days now. 4. 3. On the eve of the final deadline, Helena spent the entire night awake, rocking Clara and trying to formulate a plan that simply didn't exist. Dona Josefa, lying in the next room, breathed with difficulty, each breath a harsh and painful sound. The old lady was rapidly worsening, the stress of the situation accelerating the decline of her already fragile health. When the 7th day dawned, Helena knew there was no escape. She began to gather her few possessions, some of her and the baby's clothes, Dona Josefa's shawl, a thin blanket, a little food that remained, a small Bible that had belonged to her grandmother. Everything fit in a cloth bundle that she could carry on one shoulder. Augusto and Lucia arrived at noon sharp, accompanied by 2 large, intimidating-looking men, clearly hired to ensure there was no resistance. "The time has come," announced Augusto, his voice echoing coldly in the small room. "I hope you have your things ready." Helena, holding Clara against her chest, just nodded toward the bundle on the floor. Dona Josefa was sitting in a chair, trembling, eyes fixed on some distant point. "Is that all?" asked Lucia, looking at the miserable bundle with disdain. "Well, better for us. Less dirt to clean." The 2 men advanced, grabbed the bundle and threw it outside the door. Then they turned to Dona Josefa. "Come on, old woman," said one of them, trying to lift her from the chair. "Don't touch her." Helena screamed. "She can walk on her own." But Dona Josefa couldn't. Her legs gave way when she tried to stand, and she would have fallen if the man hadn't held her. Helena ran to help, passing the baby to her left arm while supporting her mother with her right. Together, staggering, they left the house. The midday sun was merciless, burning their heads, and the world seemed to spin around Helena for a moment. She stopped at the door, looking back one last time. The house where she had been happy. The house where she had dreamed of raising her daughter. The house that was now being torn from her with a cruelty that seemed impossible to be real. But it was real. Terribly, painfully real. Augusto came out after them, a large key in his hand. He locked the door with a final metallic sound, like the closing of a coffin. Then, without a single word of farewell or a gesture of humanity, he and Lucia returned to their wagon and left, raising a cloud of red dust. Helena stood there in the middle of the dirt road, holding her daughter and supporting her mother, with a miserable bundle at her feet. Around her, the vastness of the Cerrado stretched in all directions, yellow and dry under the merciless sun. There was no other house in sight, no charitable soul miraculously appearing to save them. There was only emptiness, abandonment, absolute despair. "Where are we going, my daughter?" asked Dona Josefa, her voice weak. Helena looked at the dusty road stretching ahead. She didn't know. She had no idea. But they couldn't stand there under the scorching sun. "Let's walk," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "We'll find somewhere." And so, with the baby in her arms, her mother stumbling beside her, and the bundle on her back, Helena began to walk. Each step was an agony. Her feet, barefoot on the hot earth, were soon bleeding. Clara cried endlessly, hungry and uncomfortable. Dona Josefa stumbled every few meters, breathing with difficulty, sweating cold despite the heat. They walked for hours, with no clear idea of where they were going. The road seemed to stretch infinitely ahead, always the same, always empty. The sun slowly descended in the sky, tinging everything red and orange, and Helena knew that soon it would be night. Night in the Cerrado without shelter, with a baby and a sick elderly woman. The prospect was terrifying. When the sun finally touched the horizon, they reached a fork in the road. To the left, the path continued toward the village, still 2 days' walk away. To the right, it led inland to lands Helena didn't know. She hesitated, not knowing what to do, when she heard something that made her freeze. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Helena turned quickly, protecting Clara with her arms, prepared to run if necessary. But when the figure emerged from the growing twilight, she saw it was an elderly man, bent by the weight of years, but still walking with firm steps. He wore simple clothes, worn by time, and carried a crude walking stick. When he approached, Helena could see his face clearly. He was at least 70 years old, maybe more. His face was deeply tanned and wrinkled by sun and time, but his eyes, of a surprisingly clear blue, were kind. He stopped a few meters from them, assessing the situation with an experienced eye. "Good evening," he said, his voice hoarse but cordial. "You seem to be in trouble." Helena wanted to respond, but the words refused to come out. It was all too much. The exhaustion, the despair, the fear. She could only nod, and to her shame, tears began to fall again. The old man looked at the baby in her arms, at Dona Josefa stumbling beside her, at the miserable bundle at her feet. And then, with a kindness Helena no longer expected to find in this world, he said, "Come with me. I have a house not far from here. You can spend the night, eat something warm. Then we'll decide what to do." Helena looked at him through her tears, searching for signs of bad intentions, but finding only genuine compassion. She looked at Dona Josefa, who nodded slightly. "Thank you," Helena whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much." The old man smiled, revealing teeth that were no longer many, and picked up the bundle from the ground as if it weighed nothing. "My name is Sameo," he said, "and you're welcome." They walked for another half hour, until a small structure appeared in the now dark landscape. It was a modest house, even smaller than the one Helena had been expelled from, but it looked solid. Beside it, there was a small stable and what appeared to be a vegetable garden. Sameo led them inside. The interior was clean but Spartan. A simple room with a table, some chairs, a wood stove still lit. 2 doors led to other rooms, probably bedrooms. "Sit down," he said, indicating the chairs. "I'll get fresh water and prepare some food." While Sameo moved through the house with the efficiency of someone who had lived alone for a long time, Helena finally relaxed a little. Dona Josefa collapsed into a chair, exhausted, and Helena sat beside her, nursing Clara, who finally began to calm down. Sameo brought clean water in a clay jug, fresh bread, cheese, some fruits. It wasn't a feast, but for the 2 famished women, it seemed like a banquet. They ate in silence, slowly, savoring each piece. When they finished, Sameo sat at the table with them, watching them with those kind blue eyes. "So," he said gently, "do you want to tell me what happened?" And Helena told. She told everything. Benedito's death, the in-laws' arrival, the brutal eviction, the desperate search for help, the walk in the wilderness. The words poured out like a river breaking a dam, and she couldn't stop. Sameo listened to everything without interrupting, just nodding occasionally, his face showing more compassion and indignation with each word. When she finally finished, exhausted, Sameo was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his words would change everything. "You can stay here," he said simply, "for as long as you need. This house is too big for an old man alone anyway." Helena looked at him, not believing what she heard. "Stay. But we have nothing to offer in return. We can't pay." Sameo raised a hand, interrupting her. "I don't want payment. I've lived a long time in this life and seen a lot of cruelty. If I can offer a little kindness now, I'll do it." "But why?" asked Helena, confused. "You don't even know us." Sameo smiled sadly. "A long time ago, I also needed help, and no one was there to give it. I lost everything I loved because of people's indifference. I swore I would never be like them." Dona Josefa, who had been silent during the entire conversation, finally spoke. "You're a good man, Sameo. God bless you." "I don't know about that," said Sameo, standing up. "But I know I can't let a woman with a baby and an elderly woman sleep in the open. Come, I'll show you where you can rest." He led them to one of the rooms, small but clean, with a simple wooden bed covered with a straw mattress and worn but clean sheets. There was a small window and an empty shelf on the wall. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow we'll talk about the future." That night, for the first time in weeks, Helena slept deeply. Exhausted to the bone, she collapsed on the bed with Clara beside her and Dona Josefa lying nearby. And for a few blessed hours, despair and fear were set aside. In the following days, a routine began to form. Sameo was a lonely farmer who had lived in that house for more than 40 years. He had never married, never had children. His entire family had already died, leaving him alone with his modest lands and his loneliness. He cultivated a small vegetable garden, raised some chickens, had 2 goats that gave him milk. He wasn't rich, not by far, but she wasn't in need. And now, with Helena and Dona Josefa there, the house seemed less empty, less silent. Helena, determined not to be a burden, began to help as soon as she recovered some of her strength. She took care of the garden, cooked the meals, cleaned the house. Dona Josefa, despite her age and fragile health, contributed as she could, mending clothes, rocking Clara to sleep when Helena needed to work. Sameo never asked for anything in return, never made any comments suggesting that their presence was an inconvenience. On the contrary, he seemed happy to have company. In the evenings, they would sit at the table after dinner, and Sameo would tell stories of his youth, of the old times, of the changes he had witnessed throughout his long life. Helena began to feel something she didn't expect to feel again. Hope. Perhaps they could build a life there. It wouldn't be the life she had dreamed of, but it would be a life. It would be survival, dignity, peace. But fate still had one more twist in store. One afternoon, 3 months after arriving at Sameo's house, Helena was in the garden when she heard a strange noise coming from the stable. It sounded like crying. Confused, she approached and, to her astonishment, found Sameo sitting on the ground, his face in his hands, sobbing. "Sameo!" she exclaimed, running to him. "What happened?" The old man raised his face, and Helena saw that he was more than just crying. There was in him a deep despair, an ancient and terrible pain that had finally found its way out. "I'm dying," he said simply, and the words fell like stones. Helena felt the world tremble around her. Not again. It couldn't be. "How do you know?" she asked, her voice shaking. Sameo touched his own chest. "For months. Pain here. Getting worse each time. And blood when I cough. I know what it is. I saw my father die from the same thing." Helena sat down beside him, her hands trembling. "Are you sure? Maybe a doctor." "There's no doctor who can cure this," said Sameo, his voice tired. "And even if there were, I don't have the money for it. No, my time is coming. I feel it in my bones." They remained in silence for a long moment. Then Helena asked what she was terrified to ask. "How long?" Sameo shrugged. "Months. Maybe a year if I'm lucky. But not much more." And then he said something that would change everything. "Helena, I need to ask you something. Something important." "Anything," she said immediately. Sameo took a deep breath. "I have something hidden here. Something I've kept my entire life. Something valuable. Very valuable." Helena looked at him, confused. "Valuable." "Gold," said Sameo in a low voice. "A significant amount of gold." Helena blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Gold." Sameo nodded. 50 years ago, when I was young, I worked in the mines. On a clandestine expedition, we found a rich vein. I managed to hide a good amount before the foreman discovered it. I brought it here, hid it. I planned to use it one day, but I never found a reason. I never had a family to leave it to. So it stayed here, buried, waiting. He looked directly into Helena's eyes. "I want you to have it. All of you. When I die, I want you to dig it up and use it to build a better life." For you, for Clara, for Dona Josefa." Helena felt tears burning in her eyes. "Simeo, I can't accept this. It's yours." "And I have no more use for it," interrupted Simeo firmly. "You saved my life as much as I saved yours. You gave this lonely old man company, warmth, a reason to wake up in the morning. It's little in return." But Helena shook her head vigorously. "No, I won't wait for you to die to receive this. If this gold exists, we'll use it now. To help you. To find a doctor, medicine, whatever is necessary." Simeo began to protest, but Helena wouldn't let him. In that moment, she had a strength she didn't know she possessed. A fierce determination. "You saved us when we were lost," she said, holding the old man's hands. "Now it's our turn to save you." And so, that very afternoon, Simeo led them to the back of the stable, where the ground looked like any other. But he counted 20 steps in a specific direction, then 10 in another, and began to dig with an old shovel. It wasn't deep, perhaps half a meter. And then the shovel struck something solid. Something wrapped in old oiled cloth and tied with rope. When they opened the package, the yellowish gleam of gold reflected the late afternoon light. It wasn't a vast fortune, but it was substantial. Nuggets, old coins, small bars. Enough to change an entire life. Helena looked at it, barely believing. Then she looked at Simeo, and saw tears in the old man's eyes. "Now you have a future," he said, smiling through his tears. "Now everything will be okay." But Helena had other plans. In the following weeks, she and Simeo traveled to the city, taking part of the gold. They found a doctor, an experienced man who had studied in Portugal. He examined Simeo, confirmed the diagnosis, but said there were treatments. Expensive, long, with no guarantees but possible. Helena paid without hesitation. She paid for the medicines, the consultations, whatever was necessary. And something miraculous happened. Simeo began to improve. Slowly, very slowly, but visibly. The cough decreased, color returned to his face, strength returned to his limbs. It took more than a year. A year of constant care, treatments, alternating hope and fear. But Simeo survived. Against all odds, he survived. And with the rest of the gold, Helena did something even more extraordinary. She bought land. Not vast extensions, but enough. She built a larger, comfortable house. She hired workers. She established a prosperous property. And when Augusto and Lucia heard about the poor widow who was now a landowner, who had risen in life in an inexplicable way, they came to investigate. They arrived full of disdain and superiority, ready to mock or exploit. But when they saw Helena, no longer thin and desperate, but strong and dignified, dressed in decent clothes, living in a house better than theirs, something changed in their faces. The expression went from disdain to shock, then to something that looked like bitter envy. Helena received them at the door without inviting them in. Clara, now over a year old, played in the yard under the watchful eyes of Dona Josefa, who surprisingly had improved greatly with good food and medical care. "What do you want here?" asked Helena, her voice cold. Augusto, for the first time in his life, seemed speechless. Lucia, on the other hand, tried to assume her usual attitude of superiority. "We heard you had luck," she said, the word sounding like poison. "We wanted to see for ourselves." "Luck," repeated Helena, a bitter smile on her lips. "You call it luck when you rob someone of everything they have, expel a woman and a newborn baby, and then that woman survives despite you?" "We had legal rights," Augusto began, but Helena interrupted him. "You had legal rights to be monsters? To leave a child out in the elements? An elderly sick woman to die in the street? You call that rights?" The silence that followed was heavy. Behind Helena, Simeo appeared, his presence comforting. "You'd better leave," he said, his voice stronger than Augusto and Lucia had seen him. "You're not welcome here." They stood there for another moment, clearly wanting to say something, do something. But there was nothing to be said or done. Helena had won. Not with revenge or violence, but simply by surviving, prospering, proving that their cruelty hadn't destroyed her spirit. Augusto and Lucia turned and left, and Helena never saw them again. The years passed. Simeo lived another 15 years, enough time to see Clara grow up, learn to read, become an intelligent and compassionate young woman like her mother. Dona Josefa lived to be 94, passing away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the love of her family. When Simeo finally departed, in his bed, in peace, surrounded by Helena and Clara, his last words were of gratitude. "You gave me something that gold could never buy," he whispered. "A family, a purpose, love." Helena buried him on the property grounds, under a tree he loved. And during the years that followed, she told his story to Clara, and then to the grandchildren, and then to the great-grandchildren. The story of how a stranger's kindness saved 3 lives, and how the gratitude and determination of a desperate woman saved his life in return. The property prospered through the generations. Clara married well, had children who honored Simeo's memory. The family grew, but never forgot where they came from. Never forgot those terrible days of despair, nor the miracle that came after. And whenever someone in need arrived at their door, whoever they were, wherever they came from, Helena received them. She offered food, shelter, help, because she knew, better than anyone, what it meant to be lost and desperate, and what it meant when someone extended their hand. The wickedness of Augusto and Lucia had intended to destroy her, but instead, involuntarily, it had placed Helena on Simeo's path. And from that unlikely encounter in the middle of a dusty road, was born a story of redemption, kindness, and transformation that would echo through the generations. Because in the end, cruelty can hurt. It can devastate. But kindness, even coming from a lonely stranger, can heal, can save, can change everything. And that is a truth that no amount of hatred can erase. If this story touched your heart, leave your like and share it so that more people can know these moving stories that show that, even in the most desperate situations, human kindness can make all the difference. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories.